Hey guys, Kyle, the Dead Knight of Anime here, bringing you my review for Fire Force Episode 5. So, the episode wastes no time in giving us a major plot reveal, which is that Hibana and Iris both trained as sisters at the Holy Soul Temple when they were younger. And this does give clarification on something I failed to mention last week, which is that just from that one look, the look between Hibana and Iris in the last episode, you could clearly tell there was history there, and we get that history, through this flashback. But for me personally, what makes this first couple minutes so good is that their past is told just purely visual, without dialogue, and it just lets like what we're seeing on screen tell the story, and I just love it. I love that shit. I love that shit I love that shit when it comes to movies or TV or anything when we can have moments where there's no talking, no exposition, just the visuals themselves just from tell us the story, just the visuals themselves, and just what's going on screen, just can tell us the story, and in just so simple scenes, you can pretty much we can pretty much grasp on we can grasp instantaneously almost we can grasp instantaneously what pretty much what basically what Iris's opinion of Punchhabana is. They're like they were obviously they obviously like pretty much church sisters back then, but Iris herself, she saw Hibana as an older sister. So yeah, we pretty much just get we just get that vibe just from the visuals alone, and I love that. I'd and in some respects, I'd even go a step further and argue that when it comes to this first couple minutes of backstory, when it comes to Iris and Hibana, I feel it achieved what Promised Neverland tried to do, but didn't always succeed at. Because when it came to its visual storytelling in general, like not just with flashbacks, but there were so many times in Promised Neverland anime where they cut out a lot of dialogue and just tried to let the visuals speak for themselves, and it was one of those things where it worked sometimes, but it didn't work out all the time, and but yeah, just in this small moment, it just in this small. But yeah, just because in general, visual storytelling is a cool way to tell. It is a cool way in order to tell a narrative, but it is still very tricky to pull off. But yeah, with this one, it just pulled it off beautifully. One thing I also like is basically when we first do see Iris confronting Hibana face to face, the whole conversation between them once again plays into the whole idea of the series of how there is this test of faith, and how while Iris has continued to believe in basically everything that in what the church taught her, Hibana, on the other hand, not only stopped believing after learning what being a fire soldier is really about, but Hibana also saw it as a justification for her cruelty and in order to proceed with the fifth's like unethical practices, as we see in this episode, like when it came to what pretty much what Hibana believes in this episode, she like it's weird to say, but in terms of her views on this whole thing, it is really a little more realistic, but it's basically also but at the same time, her pretty much ideals her ideals have also been extremely twisted by learning the truth. So it just plays into how each person depending on their. It also plays into how each person is basically going to have a different perspective on things, just based on is going to have a different perspective on things when they learn the truth of something. It really doesn't matter as it really doesn't matter as it can, and this can apply to anything. Like when at any point in time, whenever we as humans end up learning the truth of something, we always are going to end up having a different perspective on things, and no one is ever really going to have the same opinion on something. With Hibana, she pretty much just saw it as a means to be cruel and whatnot. So yeah. Now getting into the adaptation and pacing of the episode itself. It was pretty good, but at the same time, this particular episode wasn't necessarily one that really had a whole lot that pretty much required censoring to begin with. The only censorship I found was basically that David Productions had completely changed the pretty much scenario in which Iris had met Hibana, and they cut out the scene of Hibana like from stepping on her subordinates like pretty much a platform, which is an odd thing to censor considering they kept the Iris fan service in for the most part intact. But it's one of those things where okay, David Productions, you pretty much just showed just last week an episode of Hibana being this domineering presence with her just using her subordinates as a chair and footstools and whatnot. So why cutting that out now? Like, again, it's a weird thing to focus on, but it's like you had that last episode, so why cutting it out here, kind of thing. But I don't know. I can only assume that maybe they just don't want to draw attention to it. I don't know, but yeah, of all the things to censor, that was the weirdest thing for me. Weird to say. Weirdly, and okay, another, and okay, I guess another thing weirdly for me, another, and weirdly enough, one thing I also noticed about this episode, however, is that even though there was a lot from the manga that was adapted in this episode, my second biggest concern still seems to be working its way into the series, which is that there are moments I'm noticing of the episode. There were moments of the episode I noticed of the episode being padded out, which it wasn't totally. They weren't small. They weren't like big moments or extended the episode to like an annoying degree, but there were still moments I did notice of this happening, and when it comes to padding out the episode, when it comes to the concept of padding out an episode, it is an interesting tightrope to walk, because on one hand it's going to help. This is going to be helpful in the sense that David Productions isn't going to have to worry about catching up to the manga, but I think we are going to. I think we're padding out the episode could basically be an issue in the future. Is that we'll have to. I think this whole padding out is probably going to be an issue in the future for sure. Like I was pretty much having a discussion with someone on Anime Amino when I pretty much made my when I made when I made one of those Wikia things about the Fire Force anime, and they left and we had this discussion about what exactly is going to be the thing that's going to cause the biggest problem, and we agreed censorship is one thing, but I think pacing is probably going to be another at some point, but since so far it's good, but it might become a problem later on. Again, it's a weird thing considering. Again, it's a weird thing to focus on considering how many chapters were adapted. But the padding is still becoming a little more noticeable, I guess you could say. Um, and I'll be honest. Even as a manga reader, I'm still fascinated by the idea that I'm still fascinated, but I'm still fascinated by the idea that pretty much Toru, one of the Company 5 fire soldiers, the way he uses his power, he actually uses bubblegum as a conduit for his power. I mean, with Toru using bubblegum as a conduit for his power, it's one of those things that sounds ridiculous as shit when you pretty much when you hear him explain it and see it in action. When you hear him explain it, it sounds ridiculous as shit on the surface, but when you hear him explain it and see it in action, it suddenly becomes the most plausible and most threatening thing ever. I mean, it's so weird to say that pretty much that I was actually taking bubblegum bombs seriously in this episode. Like I was and this is coming from someone who has read the manga. I had the exact same reaction. Like, bubblegum bombs, really? It's so freaking goofy and yet so freaking threatening in the way it's presented. It's incredible. It really is kind of incredible. And like I feel that in a way it's kind of one of those times where stuff like this, it's kind of a testament to pretty much Atsushi Kubo's writing and just how he can make the most ridiculous concepts seem absolutely genuine when executed. It's like in many respects, I know they're friends from what I hear, but in many respects, it's pretty much the opposite of from Shiro Mashima. Like the guy has some amazing concepts when it comes to his stories, but he definitely fails in the execution department. Whereas with Akubo, he's got some pretty ridiculous ideas, but executed brilliantly. Like, yeah, it's kind of amazing in that way. And overall, and leading into that, this episode was just a no holds bar brawl between Company 8 and Company 5. Like the pretty much battle between Company 8 and Company 5 is essentially what makes up the majority of the episode. And it is amazing at every turn. In fact, I'll take this time to say that the art and animation, it has issues still, but it was a definite improvement over last week for sure. But yeah, just the battle of Company 8, Company 5 at every turn, whether it was Arthur and that old dude, or basically Toru fighting, it was Maki and Hinowa. Like, every fight was just epic as shit, and I loved every minute of it. Like, it was. This is like an epic. This is definitely the fights. Definitely the fights are few and far between when it comes to Fire Force. But when they hit, they fucking hit, and I love it. Also another thing we learned in this episode is that Hinowa is a second generation fire soldier in this episode, and which in itself is something I feel is kind of obvious and we can kind of pick apart ourselves at this point. But it's nice to get this clarification as well that yes, he is a second generation like Maki. One thing I will say though is when it came to explaining how his powers work, they took a few liberties in the way they presented the explanation compared to the manga. In the manga, like with basically Maki's dialogue and her explanation, it was structured as a voiceover to a diagram of Hinowa's gun, whereas in the anime, they pretty much gave us the explanation and then cut to the diagram of the gun afterwards, which is one of those things that where it made the diagram feel like it was in there just to fill space and could have been cut out. Like, yeah, it was a weird way in which it's a small thing, I know, but just the way they kind of handled that, it weirded me out a little bit. But yeah, guys, That's my review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Crunchyroll. Death Knight of Anime, signing off. Later, guys.